Okay, so we're going to review for the test on Tuesday. I want to go over the pages that you read last night or yesterday. It would have been 325 to the end of the book. And I'm doing a video like this because I wanted to be able to show you the test review, which we are going to get to, but I want to go over the text or the book first. So starting at the bottom of 325, Dick begins to write to different appeals procedures, and he ends up finding a guy named Schultz who takes their case, and they basically do the trial again. Over on 327 it says that everyone was there. It was kind of like what does he call it? The whole cast reassembled, except for, instead of the original defendants, instead of Dick and Perry being there, the original judge, Judge Tate, and then the two original defense attorneys, Mr. Fleming and Harrison Smith, are there. And so they're there. All of the jurors that were there originally, they are there also. And so you have basically they're just trying to get down to the bottom of, was the original trial a fair trial? Was it unbiased? Tate, the judge, says that he can't grant a change of venue for the trial unless it was requested, which pivots Schultz to turn to, or he pivots and turns to the original defense attorneys and asks them, why wasn't there a change of trial or a change of location requested? Because of the bias from the community, that they would have been biased against them. On 329, Schultz goes over all of the different mistakes that the first attorneys made, that they had, taken confessions without having an attorney present. I think he goes into this later, that there was they had taken the gun and something else from the Hickok residence without a search warrant. So it was all these things that, because they just knew they were guilty, they didn't try to go about things maybe the best way that they could have. And then they also say that the defense attorneys should have had Dick and Perry plead guilty and then just plead for their lives, instead of pleading not guilty and then more than likely getting the death penalty, which is what ends up happening. They end up getting a new execution date. This is their second one, for October 25th, 1962. That one is also granted a reprieve, so they don't end up hanging on that day. Andrews does, however, hang a month later on November the 30th. And then on 331, they talk about Andrews' execution. I want to point out on 331, the first sentence, it says, "That was a cold night," Hickok said, talking to a journalist with whom he corresponded and who was periodically allowed to visit him. Capote is referring to himself in the third person there. That's Capote. So we've talked about how close Capote is to this case, and the fact that he visited Dick and Perry on death row in Kansas just even compounds that to show how close he was. In the movie Capote, and I don't know, this isn't really included in this book, it kind of hints that Capote was the one that was trying to help them get these appeals, these stays of execution. I don't know that 100%, but we talked about earlier how if that was the case and he's just trying to keep them alive for the sake of adding information to this book, then that obviously is very unethical. But he was too close to this case for sure. So Andrews was executed. He's a big guy, so it takes him 19 minutes. His heart continues to beat for 19 minutes after he is hanged. They kind of talk about describing the events that take place up until his execution day. They're kind of joking about different things. We also find out that Lee Lowell, Andrews' aunt and uncle, are going to bury him next to his family members that he killed. So I guess they don't really care that he did that, because they're going to bury, I'm sure they care, but they're still going to bury him with the people that he killed. On 333, Dick kind of goes into some detail about how Andy or Andrews knew a lot because he was book smart, and that Dick knew a lot because he had lived a lot. So just how the two of those different kind of knowledge differs. And then you have Perry, who was he was kind of glad to see Andrews go because he felt like it was kind of that Andrews would rub it in that Perry was not as educated as Andrews, and Perry wanted to be more educated. Dick's mom wanted to see Perry the next time that she came. And then it's also interesting, Ronnie York's mom was there, one of the other guys on death row, and then like his mom and Dick's mom kind of like become friends, and they might move to Florida together. So it's interesting that like the only friends that they might have are like the mom of someone else whose son is on death row. This is just a lot of Dick and Perry talking, not anything super substantial. Dick is hoping that, if he smokes, that maybe he'll get cancer and beat them at their own game. On 336, we find out that they have avoided 4 total execution dates at this point. They finally hang on their 5th execution date, which is April 14th, 1965, after spending almost 2,000 days in jail. That is insane to me. So they were first taken there, I believe it was 1960, I think. And then they're there for almost 2,000 days. And so Al Dewey was there. And then we also have to ask ourselves, if we go over to 338, 339, 340, all of the detail that is included here, we have to ask ourselves if Capote was there. And I believe he was. The movie Capote makes it out that he was, and for him to have this amount of detail, I feel like he would have had to have been there. Which again, is he there because he's invested in Dick and Perry, or is he there because he needs more detail for his book, because he wants to include this part in the book, because it's like an ending to what all has been happening. So it's just kind of crazy that he was there. All of the main detectives are there. Church, Dunst, Nye, and Dewey are all there. And so Dick hangs first, and then Perry comes in, and he finally, before he is executed, finally says that he apologizes. And on 341, Dewey says that he had imagined with the deaths of Smith and Hickok that he would experience a sense of climax release of a design justly completed. But then he goes back to a year before this, so it would have been in like 1964, that he'd gone to the Garden City, or the Valley View Cemetery, where I believe it's in Garden City, where the Clutters are buried. We also find out that like Judge Tate is buried there, and that Ishida's elder daughter Bonnie died in a car crash. And then as Dewey, kind of ambles into the cemetery, he sees Susan Kidwell, and kind of like this representation of what Nancy would have been if she had still been alive. And this is like 5 years since the deaths have happened, and so just kind of like, what would Nancy have been like, as a young adult. And then we find out that Bobby Rupp has gotten married, and then Susan has to leave, and that's when on 343, Dewey says, he tells her good luck. He says, as she disappeared down the path, a pretty girl in a hurry, her smooth hair swinging, shining, just such a young woman as Nancy might have been. And again, we feel like, Dewey would have told this to Capote, for him to include in the book. And I like how Capote ends it. It says, then starting home, he walked toward the trees and under them, leaving behind him the big sky, the whisper of wind voices, and the wind-bent wheat. almost like whose voices are there. Is it the clutter voices? Is it just the voices of people at the cemetery in general? I don't know. Just like, are the clutters still with them even though they're gone? I don't know. So yeah, that is the end. And we have talked a lot about, why Capote was so involved. Some speculate that he had feelings for Perry, like romantic feelings. And that's why he was so involved. Some speculate that it was because of his book, that he needed more detail. There's a lot of speculation. So, let's talk about the test. I wish that we could review together, but really what I would suggest that you do, the test essay, or the test format is going to be essay questions. I would go through for each of these points. If you'll notice on this, it's the same review over and over. I usually print this off and then I just cut them up, so it's the same thing all the way down. What I would do is I would copy and paste this to a different document, and I would kind of start making notes about where you find these things in the book, and then how, and then tell me why. So the purpose of large amounts of detail in the book, I would have an example of that, and then explain why there's that much detail. So what is the purpose of having all of that detail in the book? Capote's depth of research as he wrote the book, could give an example of that and know why he includes all that research. The purpose of the stories of the other inmates on death row. I think this probably serves a couple different purposes to show that Dick and Perry are not the only crazy people that have done things, but it also just kind of gives us some context of who's surrounding Dick and Perry. They're not just people with no story. They are people and they have stories, and so I'm sure Dick and Perry, they talked with them and figured out, well, what are you in for? And so it just kind of puts us more there in the moment. This is going to be a big one, and it will be on the test. To balance the humanity of the murderers with the atrociousness of their crimes. And this is something that Capote did not do well. He got way too invested with their humanity, that they were actual people that had a really sad story, especially Perry. And he had a hard time balancing that with the fact that they killed 4 people in cold blood. And so that is what we have to kind of figure out and balance, where does it stop being an excuse? Your past and all that you have done, where does that stop being an excuse for knowing right from wrong? So that's what that question will be about. And then how the crime and investigation would have been different if they had taken place today, and how would the research and proximity of the author be different? This just kind of makes us think about this took place in the early 1960s. If something like this were to happen in 2022, how would some of the things be different? How would maybe the evidence be different? How would tracking criminals be different when they're on the run? How would the death penalty conversation be different? How would the research and proximity of the author be different? Because, like we've said so many times, Capote was way too involved in this case. So how would that be different if it took place today? And so maybe I would just jot down a few things about that and maybe compare with what happened in the book so that you have evidence to back that up. And that's all I have for you. If you have questions about the review, you can send me an email, and then we will, and then if you have questions about the test, please don't wait till 6th hour on Tuesday to come ask me. Come in before school, or find me during my plan, which is 3rd hour, and we can have a conversation. All right. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry we had to finish it online, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, let me know.